Yeah, good evening, everybody. This is Santosh Anampalli. I work with Kivit as a cloud architect. So today I'm going to talk about using Azure Policy to enforce technical standards on an Azure platform. So in this session, I'll start off with a use case where I'll show a use case wherein if there are no standards enforced on an environment, what are the common concerns that could come up with? And after that, I'll talk about how Azure Policy can help us in enforcing standards. And even when using Azure Policy, I mean, how do you identify the requirements on standards and how do you enforce it? That is something also I'll be talking about. And after that, I'll give a quick demo on a couple of scenarios where I will create some policies and try to enforce standards on an Azure environment. So let's take this use case. Assume that there is no solution implemented to monitor the standards. I mean, there is no solution which will say, okay, these are the technical standards, and there are no standards. Then it will show up. Okay, these standards are not compliant or non-compliant. So assume that in this use case that there is nothing configured. So take a look at this one. So it's a Azure environment. In there are multiple workloads. Having each of the workload is using different Azure service. If you look into this one, let's assume that there are no standards enforced with a solution. So what are the common concerns that we can see here? You can see that probably data in transit is not configured for some of the workloads. And if you can see, like, probably there is the data in transit is not enabled. The cost is high because of not right sizing the compute. Somebody is using the compute which is of size which is not needed at all. And somebody has configured a service which is not even allowed within that particular organization. So, I mean, there is no visibility in this use case where you can say, okay, these are the list of all services which are following our organization standards, and these are the list of the services where they are non-compliant, and what action should we take on that? And also, there is no restriction on enforcing a standard saying that, okay, you cannot deploy a data or a service in a region other than the approved region, or you cannot use an service which is not authorized or approved by a team. So the concern is, like, how do you enforce? First of all, why do we need to enforce? I mean, these issues are there. What issues this will cause? So you can see that, I mean, if there is a inconsistency in resource configuration, probably some of the services are configured right in one workload, and some of the services are not properly configured in another workload. Since there is no HTTP and HTTPS enabled, if there is no data in transit, security enabled, then you'll definitely have security concerns. So, and also if there is no restriction on what compute size you can use, what tier you can use, so this will all cause increase in the cost. So how do you handle all this concerns? Like, even some of these misconfigurations can lead to compliance issues. So if you are storing the data in a region where you're not supposed to store, then that can cause the compliance issues. So yeah, so in this kind of environments where there is no solution to monitor the misconfigurations or the things, so definitely you need some kind of solution where you can get the visibility on what are the various resources, how they are configured, and if there are any resource inconsistencies which fall under non-compliance, that would be a good solution to have. So that is where we have Azure Policy. So if you look into Azure Policy, Policy is a service on Azure environment, which would allow you to create policies based on your standards, whatever you define, and it will uh, and these policies will be monitored on a daily basis or whenever you create a resources or create new policies, and it will give you a compliance report saying that okay, these are the list of the services which are in compliant with my policies, and these are the resources which are not in compliant with the standards which I enforced. So with Azure Policy, there are inbuilt things which come with. So Azure Policy comes with inbuilt policies and initiatives. These are predefined policies which are provided by Microsoft, and these are based on the industry standards. So you could directly use them, or you could create your own custom policies based on the standards which your organization defines. So so once you define what standards you want to enforce in your organization based on the services which you use, so then you take those policies and apply to the services at various levels. So you could enforce these standards at a management group level, a subscription level, or a organization level. So once you apply these policies, so there is a inbuilt dashboard which is available in Azure Policy, wherein you can see like what are the list of the policies which you have assigned to the organization, and how does the complaints look like. You can see what are the resources which are following your standards and what are the resources which are not following your standards. So yeah. So in order to enforce standards, so as I was mentioning, is the first thing is to identify the standards. What I mean by identifying the standards is, even if you look into the Azure Policy, there are plenty of initiatives and standards. There are initiatives which are applicable to Nest or some other initiatives, and also the inbuilt policies which are applicable to various services. The thing we need to identify here is, do we need all services, or what are the policies which we need to apply? So the first thing as part of the workflow is to identify what policies you need for the organization based on the services which you use. And once you identify the list of policies that you think like will be a right fit for your organization, then what you do is you create the policies for those standards. So how do you create a policy? So there are multiple ways of doing it. You could create a policy in Azure portal or using a PowerShell, or or even using policy as a code. So if your current environment is using infrastructure as code, then you can use policy as code along with it and try to create policies inside your, try to create policies as code, put all the policies in a repository and deploy those policies as part of CI/CD pipeline. So there are multiple ways of doing it. So the first thing is like identifying what are the standards you want to enforce within your organization, and then how to implement that. So once you implement that, then how do you monitor it? So Azure Policy has inbuilt dashboard where you could go and see like, okay, what are the assigned uh, policies to the environment. And you can see what are the various resources which are in compliant with the policy and which are not. So that is one way of monitoring the resource compliance. The other way is like you could create your own custom dashboard. You can create a Power BI dashboard wherein you could call the policy related APIs, Azure API endpoints, which and get the policy information. And based on that data, you can create a dashboard and show which ones are in compliant and which ones are not. So let's take this workload. I mean, as part of the use case, there were multiple workloads which I've shown you as part of that. Let's pick one workload where it uses this Azure services. So when I look into this one and I had to identify what are the applicable standards for the services. I mean, if you look into the first one, it's on the Azure environment. So where do you want to deploy your data and services on the Azure environment. What are the standards for your organization? On which regions do you think that the data should be allowed and which regions the data should not be allowed? So that's one kind of policy you can set up. And if you look into the other services, like in this screenshot, uh, there is an app service plan, queue, function app, and database services being used. So what policies you can apply for each of this service? How do you identify it? I mean, there are multiple ways of identifying it. Based on industry standard, you can do that. And based on organization requirements, you can do that. And to make the things easy, Microsoft has provided built-in policies where you can filter based on the category of what type of service it is, and you can pick and choose what policies you want to apply. So just in this example, if you look into that app service plan, so if I had to think about what standard I should apply, then I would think like, okay, what are the list of sizes that I should allow within my organization, because it would directly impact my overall cost of the Azure. And if you look into the app services, on top of my head, if I just think, okay, is the authentication enabled on this app? Is this authorization enabled? Is the is the HTTPS enabled on this one? So these are the pretty common technical standards which come up to my mind. So in order to identify the applicable standards, the easiest way to go to the policy portal, Azure portal, and then go to policy surveys, then see list of the definitions, what they have, and based on the definitions, filter out what are the applicable policies which we can use. So after defining the standards, what we want, I mean, we want the resources to be compliant. Follow the compliance policies within the organization. It would help us in managing the cost, handle the security concerns, make sure like the resources are configured consistently, and we get a overall visibility on how the resources are handled. I mean, what are the standards which are imposed on the resources, and how the compliance is at each level of the service. So I'll quickly go through the Azure portal, and I'll show you like what are the different sections which are available on the policy service. So this is the policy. Oh, the sharing is stopped. It is now, right? Yeah. Okay, so this is the service which I'm talking about, Azure Policy. So if you look into it, so it has list of the definitions, policy definitions. So if you have to identify a policy for a specific service, Microsoft has provided an option, provided built-in policies. You could go and see the list of policies which are inbuilt. You can see there are initiatives and policies as well, which are provided by default by Azure. So if I go in here, let's take the scenario where we were trying to identify the policies. So if I go to I want to see like what are the default, what are the available policies for app service. Go here. Choose app service. So these are the built-in policies which are provided by Microsoft. So if you look into this one, not all of them will be applicable. There are like hundreds of policies which are provided here. So it's up to you. I mean, it's up to the organization to decide which policies are applicable to their context and pick and choose them. If there is something which is not in here and specific to a specific scenario, then you could create a custom policy. So let's go through a couple of policies over here. Let's suppose for authentication, if you see what are the policies which are mentioned here. So you can see that app should have authentication enabled. This is a built-in policy. Probably this one would be a good policy to pick for your organization. And like that, there are various policies which are here, which are based on the industry standard. So you could pick and choose what is applicable to your organization and context, and apply that to your resources. So as I was mentioning, like you can pick and choose policies from various categories. So if you want to pick something for Key Vault, see what are the various built-in policies which are available for Key Vault, go through them, look at what is what would be the right policy for your organization and apply them. So let me go ahead and start off with a demo. So yeah, so here, if you look into this one, the definitions is where all the policies are in there, the built-in policies, the built-in initiatives. You can create your custom policies, custom initiatives over here. So assignments is a section where it will show the list of the policy assignments. So there are no assignments right now because I haven't created any. Exemptions is a place where you could create an exemption for a non-compliant resource over here. And there's a dashboard compliance. You can come here and see what are the resources which are in compliance to the policies which you have enforced and which are not. So when you assign a policy, when does it run? So Microsoft has, I mean, certain things on when does this policy execution evaluation happens. So the standard compliance evaluation happens like every 24 hours. So whatever the policies you assign to your environment, the evaluation based on those policies will happen every 24 hours. So every day when you open the dashboard, you could see the changes. The evaluation of policy will also happen when you create a new policy or assign a policy to a scope, but it will take time. It will take about like 5 to 10 minutes. And when you create a new policy, and if there is when you create a new resource and when there is a policy assigned to that resource type, or if it is applicable, then it will take like 15 or 20 minutes for that to enforce in the Azure portal. And if you want to, I mean, you could also use a PowerShell command to execute and run the compliance also. So let's take a demo. I'll walk you through a demo. So in this demo, what I'll do is I'll use a built-in policy to enforce allowed locations and try to create a resource within the allowed location and try to create a resource not within the allowed location, and then go through the compliance dashboard and show how it looks. So here we go. So there is a built-in policy called allow locations for resource groups. So I'll pick this one and I'll assign to. You have an option here to assign at various groups, various levels. So I have defined management groups, and I also have subscription. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and assign at management group level, but you can assign it at subscription and also at resource group level here. So what I'll do is instead of assigning at resource group level, I'll go ahead and assign this policy at management group level, so that whenever a subscription or whenever a resource group is created within this management group, the policies will be applied to it. So the policies would be inherited. You could also have exclusions. You can say that, okay, this policy won't be applied to this subscription, or it won't be applied to this resource group or this particular resource. And I need to mention like what are the locations which are allowed. For now, I'll just put one location. So policy is assigned. So if I go and look at the assignments, I should be able to see the policy is assigned at this scope. This is my subscription. So the policy allowed locations for resource group is assigned at custom app development subscription scope. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and try to create a resource group within the region and without outside the region and see what error I get, or is it really allowed or not. So you can see that right away, it is not letting me choose a region which is not South Central United States. And if I open it up and see everything is disabled, the reason is the policy which I applied is of effect deny. So it wouldn't even let me create a resource which is not adhering, which is not in compliance to that particular policy. So I won't be able to create the resource group outside the South Central United States. What I'll do is go ahead and select South Central United States. And now if you see, like, it will let me create. So what I'm getting by applying this policy to this resource group. So by this, I'm enforcing that my organization's data or a resource is not created outside a specific region, so that it's in compliance with the organization standards. Let me. And in another demo, this is a demo where I'll be creating, I'll be assigning a built-in policy at management group level. This is to enforce a standard where I want my storage accounts to have geo redundancy enabled. What I'll do is I'll try after that, once I assign a policy at management group level, I'll create a storage account without geo redundancy and with geo redundancy and see the compliance. So if you see here, this particular policy is of type audit policy, so it's not denied. So it will still let me create the resource, but in the compliance dashboard, it will show that it's not in compliance. So this is a built-in policy. And if you look into this policy, the available effect is of type audit, and it's of type, it's on category storage. So I'll go ahead and assign this particular policy at management group level. And if you see here, there are no parameters for this one. I'll go ahead and create this. It should reflect in the assignments. When I go to the assignments and see what are the various policies which are assigned in my organization, then you could see the list of the policies over here. This one I just created, geo redundancy storage should be enabled for storage accounts at management group scope. Now I'll try to create a storage account. And here I'll give South Central United States. And in the redundancy, instead of geo redundant storage GRS, I'll make it LRS. So once the storage, you can see that the storage, it is allowing you to create the resource because the policy is enforced as audit only, it's not deny. So once it is created, when we go to compliance dashboard and see, it should say that this particular resource is not in compliance with the policy as this particular resource is not GRS enabled. I go to policy and when I see the compliance, so if you see here, the storage account which I just created, it's not showing up here because the compliance evaluation did not happen. So usually it will take 10 or 15 minutes time to have run that particular cycle. So what I'll do is I'll run that manually. I'll use a PowerShell script to just invoke a command which will go ahead and run the compliance assessment. So usually it will take time. So when I enforce this geo redundancy storage to be enabled for storage account, what I'm trying to do here. So probably the organization standard. I mean, in an organization there could be a standards where the data has to be replicated in multiple regions. So probably that's a standard. So what this policy will help help the organization is making sure that whoever is creating the resource of type storage account, then they have to make sure that the GRS is enabled. So yeah, it will take time. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and start with third demo, and we'll come back and see if that particular resource shows up in non-compliance. So the third one is like create an exemption. So there could be scenarios where you have a policy and you created a resource which is in compliance with that policy, and you want to give an exemption to that particular policy. In this scenario, if you look into one of my resource which is shown for geo redundancy storage should be enabled for storage accounts. So yeah, right now it shows up. So the compliance scan has run. And now if you see the storage account which I recently created, it shows up as non-compliant. And when you go and click on details, it will show you the details on why it is non-compliant. So data is not refreshed. So if you look into my other storage account over here, it's a Cloud Shell storage account. And for this account, I did not enable GRS. I think it's a LRS over there. So even that one shows up as a non-compliant item here, but it's not a non-compliant. For this particular resource, I don't want a GRS to be enabled. So in that case, what I can do is I'll just go and create an exemption. Create exemption. And in the exemption page, you can go and say, OK, what is the reason for exemption? You provide the description on why you are making this particular resource exemption from the particular policy. And you can even specify, OK, till what duration you want this to be exemption to be allowed. So you can give a date and say, OK, after this date, then this exemption is no more valid and it will become non-compliant again. So I won't enable that. I'll just go with does not expire. So if I go and see, it should not be in the compliant list, non-compliant list. It should be marked as a exemption. I'll go ahead and run the scan one more time. So once the scan is complete, it should show up the storage account as a compliant or exempt from compliance. So non-compliance. Let me go through the other demo where I will create a custom policy. So what I'll do is I'll create the custom policy within the Azure portal. I'll just try to duplicate the existing policy and just tweak it just for this demo. Wrong screen. So require a tag on resource. I'll pick this. You could write a PowerShell script, or you could write policy as a code file and then deploy using CI/CD. It's totally up to you. I mean, for this demo, I'm creating a custom policy by duplicating in the portal and just creating one. Duplicate definition. I'll apply to management scope level. I'll just say this one as audit only. I'll mark this as audit. If I go and see the assignments, it should be in there.
Seems like my portal is not working correctly, so I had to reload. Did I assign it? Center. Yeah, I forgot I missed to assign it. Yeah, now you can see the three policies which I assigned at for the environment. And if I go back and see the compliance, so the one which I marked as exempt, it is showing as exempt over here. It's not showing as a non-complaint item. So I should run the command shell one more time to make sure like the custom policy for my custom policy, the scan has happened.
Run that via the screen. If you have a find certain words, it's like a prompt. So where you have shells.
This particular script you are talking about, applying the
Stacker itself, export or a script, shells. You said you can use APIs to get those results in API dashboard.
So you can create a custom dashboard, maybe with a Power BI dashboard, and you can run that Power BI dashboard to fetch the policy information. There are API endpoints on Azure. Yeah. Even with the command lines, I think there is a AZ module. Maybe I'm not wrong, but I think there are AZ modules to get the policy information. You can run those. If you look into this command, the command is start AZ policy compliance scan. There are other commands like this in that AZ module where you could run and get the policy information. Yeah. So the custom. Yeah.
No, I did say probably okay. It's probably very easy.
Yeah. So if you look into the compliance, the scan has run, and you can see the my custom policy which I created just now, and it shows that two of the resources are not compliant, and the two of resources are these two. And when you see the compliance details, it should show up. Yeah, but so when I go back to my presentation over here, so what are we trying to do with those three policies which I applied? It fits in one of these things which I was talking about: the compliance, the cost, the security, resource inconsistency, and visibility. So yeah, this is how the policies will enable the environment to have proper standards and make sure like the resources are in compliance. The cost is managed. How the cost is managed is probably you could create uh, policies where you could say that, okay, these are the allowed CPU, allowed compute sizes, or these are the allowed tires. So you could create policies and enforce those policies on the environment and make sure like the cost is under control and the people are not just creating the resources of the compute size where it is not needed. And coming to the security, you could create policies where you could enforce that the web application should always use HTTPS, or the storage account should be accessible only through HTTPS. So these are the policies which you identify and enforce to make sure that the security concerns are handled. And also when coming to resource consistency, when you make sure that you identify and create the policies and apply to the environment, those policies are applicable to all the resources of the same type. So if there is a one resource which is configured correctly, and there is another resource which is not configured correctly, the policy should catch that and show that in compliance report, where you could go and fix that. So with this, you could make sure like the resources are consistently configured and used. And coming to the visibility, so you have seen the dashboard. In the dashboard, you could see that what are the resources which have the policy assignment and which are in compliance and which are not in compliance. That is how you could get the visibility into your environment. I think I'm done. Any questions?